back as I promised or menaced to be back here with more friends, more people. And today I have with me Joel,
Yep.
who is not only a victim right now here at the couch of
That's
interviews
right.
and confessions,
Yeah.
but you were a victim of me yesterday as well.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. It was in the afternoon session yesterday.
We were
So
having lots of fun. But before we get into that, Joel, tell us a little bit about yourself. What brought you here?
sure.
What's the deal with you?
Well, yeah. So I'm the test architect at Murj. We're a medical device company. Work specifically in cardiac software, and we actually started working on K6. I did a few years ago at whenever I was at another company. It didn't take off. We kind of used, the J meters and the neo loads and those things. And actually, the reason why we came here is because of yesterday's session. So we started. Yeah,
You came
absolutely,
because of me?
absolutely. We saw that session at,
Oh my God.
that was going to happen here, and we were looking at K6, and we started through that, and we're like, let's go hear from somebody who knows what they're doing. So anyway, so that's why we started looking at this, and then got
I'm
got
glad
approval.
that you're telling me this now. Otherwise, the pressure,
a lot of
man,
pressure
the pressure.
yesterday.
At the very least, I hope that you got out of the session what you were looking for.
Yep.
I really hope that will help. But yeah, sorry, I interrupted the,
no,
the
no, you're all
description.
good.
What else?
So yeah, so I've been in test for a long time. Everywhere from manual testing, automation, client-facing software, enterprise software, all kinds of stuff, and never really got to sink my teeth into performance testing. So that seems to be another good step in the career. Once you've written standard automation frameworks, it feels rinse and repeat sometimes when you're just making the next test, the next test, and the next test. So I figured the next evolution in my career was performance. So
I like that next step. And it's interesting because not everybody takes that progress as, yeah, sure, performance is what I'm going to move next. Or they get stuck.
Right.
That's another one that I have seen often. It's great and it's good to have you here. Is this your first Starist?
It is, yeah.
Stars, whatever.
It's my first STAR conference, yes.
Okay. Any other conferences before?
I have been to
after
small
the pandemic.
ones. So yeah, I've been to small conferences. Presented at a few, mostly on the either Cypress side. I presented for Apple Tools a few times, stuff like that. But that was just for, I say, standard automation. It's the things I've been doing for a decade, right? So
Yeah. And speaking of the automations, the trade, and the things, I know that you already said, and I'm very honored to hear that you came because of the tutorial that we did yesterday. But what other things brought you here at Starries? What are you looking for?
Well, for me, so I'm a very extroverted person, and like spending time with people. And of course, like everybody else, 3 years ago, I went remote and have been in the same office for the last 3 years. So,
are you still remote?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So, and we'll be forever and ever and ever.
Okay.
And so, or at least
at the moment, that's a promise.
Yeah. And so, so part of that was just to network. A lot of the things is getting in front of people, talking about these things. Whenever you're kind of myopic on your own product all the time, you kind of get lost a little bit. And so getting in front of people, talking about some of the other issues that other people have, helping other people solve issues just by networking and talking, that gets me really fired up about quality, right? And whenever you look at the same products and the same challenges all the time, sometimes it's hard to stay motivated and excited about this role that, like I've had opportunities to move on, but I love test, right? And so that's kind of that's a big part of it. It's just kind of getting back in, getting with people and kind of reigniting some of that excitement that, I had before.
You make a great point there of being locked up. It always reminds me of the horse that
Absolutely.
won't see any side, where many organizations get that situation. I was locked up long ago I don't know anything better than what the things that I do on a daily basis.
Yep.
And showing up at these events is like,
absolutely,
like the veil is removed. And have you had any finding so far? I mean, I know that we are just in the second day and we're
Right.
just starting, but anything interesting that you would like to say, share, that you have, like, whoa, this is new, or
Well, we did have a talk yesterday afternoon on microservices
Mhm.
that I was in on. Tariq King was
Oh,
presenting
and
that.
awesome
Fantastic
presenter.
speaker. But I have been in several companies that have tried microservices and really was just really small services, you know, but it weren't. But whenever you start looking at this, I'm like, man, that's truly the way to do it, And so my coworker's here with me too, and he went actually back to his hotel room last night, was doing it this morning. Came in, he's like, I'm fired up, like
Cool.
let's do this, right? Let's get this going. Um, and so, yeah, that was really cool. Talking with some other folks as well yesterday. In fact, he was in the session in the morning, and he asked a question. It was kind of at the end. It was a huge question, right? About how do I go? I have this scenario or whatever. Anyway, so then last night we went out for dinner and we just hashed through it. And we're like, oh yeah, I think you can use K6 for that. I think you can use this for that part. How can you stand this up? Can you put hooks into your, or whatever? And those are some of my favorite sessions, and that's a lot of the reason why I'm here. So
It's crazy because that's one great side. When after the pandemic and all that, it's great to be back with people,
right,
with awesome people that you can learn so
yeah,
much from. That the aha moment with the services or microservices, or that
yeah.
you're like, oh, so that's
It's
how.
not
And
just a buzzword, right?
Mhm.
It's a buzzword for a reason because this is a really good solution
and,
versus
and,
just
and,
being a
and and
buzzword.
different. Yeah, because buzzword out there is just like, I was joking earlier today, another person that we were talking in here in the couch interview, and it's like the DevOps. It's the most misused word, that it's everything is DevOps, and we are all DevOps. You're
Right.
DevOps, and the computer is DevOps, the system, the
Yeah,
progress,
yeah, yeah.
blah, 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 blah. That buzzword, yeah, that's a situation. But as well, when probably you have or you think you have an idea, because
Yeah.
sometimes you don't know what you don't know until you come here and it's pointed out or it's explained, and you're like, oh my god, I have been doing DevOps wrong all my life, or
Right.
microservices, or all this time. It's beautiful. And at the same time, last night at dinner with some of the people assisting and coming up to the conference, was like, yeah, why don't you do this? And they will bring back, and they just say these conversations live with people,
Right.
and having the opportunity to kind of interact well. It's like a cross-pollinating
Yeah.
situation, that it's, what is the name? Brainstorming.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Did you get any cool ideas out of those
I
exercises?
haven't yet. Well, one of the things that we were talking though after a few conversations yesterday, that my coworker and I have been trying to solve some problems with technology. It's not necessarily a technological problem, right? There's, this is going to sound, I don't mean to be negative. There's a cultural thing.
Mm-hmm.
We have a different focus than some of the other people in our company, and so we need to. That I think that was kind of the aha moment that I had. Right, it's like we're trying to solve all these problems with technologies, but it's really the visibility into what we're doing. Like we're doing a lot of things correct, but we have to get eyes on that so that other people can do that. Um, that was kind of the big
The
thing, my takeaway
epiphany.
yesterday, right? Yeah.
It's not
But
only.
I found that that's true in a lot of things in quality through my career. Is it's not a technological problem. Smart people can solve technological problems, but if it's a culture problem, if it's a focus problem, like that's a whole other thing. That's a much bigger bear to tackle.
This joke from a while ago, that the error is not in the system, it's in the interface between the chair and the keyboard, and that's
Yes,
where we are
yeah, yeah,
having
yeah, for
problems.
sure, for
And
sure.
it's not all only, as you say, technical nuts and bolts, but who is going to be using the nuts and bolts, and who is going
Right.
to be working with them. And you very well said, it's convincing, or allowing, or showing the visibility, observability,
Absolutely.
understand. Because again, that's again, people don't know what they don't know, or why it is important. Earlier we were having a conversation with someone else, that they didn't know why should they care about observability, like
Mm,
this platform, this tool that will show you what is happening in the system.
right.
And the CEO is like, oh, that's why we bought it, and
Yeah,
I
right.
wanted to stop paying for that or
Right.
whatever, right?
Yeah.
And what type of problems are you seeing in that sense?
So a lot of times, well, so one of the things that has happened several times is you actually have an issue where like let's say a performance problem, and it's observable in kind of the dev environment, but it's kind of fleeting, right? You hit a link and it takes a while, and then it seems fine after that. There's got to be some correlation between what's happening and why this hit of a service is slow and this hit of a service is fast, right?
Hmm.
And so as well as when you say like there's one thing of saying like I feel like something is slow versus saying like, oh, I have the last 6 weeks of proof from the K6 in
It's not a
Grafana.
feeling. I have facts.
Right, exactly. And I would say this is exactly how slow. This is how slow it is on average. This is how slow it is at its worst. Now, I don't. At this point, I don't know what is causing that, to jump, triple in response times. But I can correlate it to when it was, right. See what else is running. Maybe automation is running at the same time, which poses another thing, right? It's unintentional load tests, right? We were talking, the Chihuahua
Yeah.
test, as you were saying, recently, right? So we have these, but if they hit at the same time that an automation run is going, well, now you have 5 or
An
10 hits on
actual
that
load
same
test
box,
on some
right?
of other component and
Right. And so, and that could be some of that correlation between when somebody sees that slowness and then
Mhm.
refreshes and it's fine, right? There could be automation running at the same time or whatever that is. And then what I noticed is like, then you have this conversation with like, okay, so we have a little bit of load and we know that something gets slower. Well, but that's just dev, right? That's just our dev box. It doesn't have as much resources as prod, and this is a common thing. What I've seemed to notice is whatever we have in dev will eventually be prod. As load
Mhm.
grows, as as any company, we want to grow, right? And so we want to grow our customer base. We want to grow the amount of data in our data set. We want to whatever, and so it will eventually be prod. How long between now and prod, right? Between this issue being a problem in dev and there. So, and that's really kind of that's one question that I have is, what's the best way to measure that?
How
What's
to
the
match
best way
up
to say
and
like, well, in 6 months, if we have growth the same way we have right now, this is also going to happen, right? Based on that hardware. So those are kind of the discussions and talking points that are really kind of going through my brain right now. Yeah.
we had a you and your colleague, I can't remember his name,
Brad.
Brett,
Yeah.
posed the question that, hey, how do I know when it gets like to a point where, and we
Yeah.
described
When
an
does a performance problem become a functional problem?
yeah,
That was the question. Yeah.
which we were discussing earlier because we walked into each other.
Yeah.
Presential events is what happens, and that's when this flurry of ideas happen
Yep.
to flow. And I have this situation where I really dislike when people call them non-functional testing or
Right.
processes. But performance, if it's not good, your application becomes non-functional. It doesn't function. It
Absolutely.
has to be related. But it's tough to convince people, and I think that line has to be removed.
Right.
Everything QA related is functional, because
Right.
if it's something that you don't feel good using the system, stops you, doesn't flow,
Right.
then the system becomes non-functional. It's unusable.
Right.
May sound like a first world problem, like it's not loading in half a second, I get stressed, but it happens. You're not
Yeah,
as
absolutely.
optimal.
Right.
And any situations like that you're having, or that you see that prompted that idea to or on your daily basis, or
So yeah, well, yeah, it's kind of the reason why we started going down this performance road, to where, because we are having these discussions, and once you can, this is where the observability comes in. Once you can show somebody like, yes, this is a thing, they're like, oh yeah, let's
Mhm.
let's get on that, and start making steps, in the right direction. Otherwise, it's just kind of bad smells, right? And if
you don't know where it is, but something smells here.
yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. But you can't go to somebody high level in your organization and say like, hey, we need to stop this really high priority project that's this super cool feature that's coming up, right, that we're all really excited about, because we need to look at something we've already done, right, because it smells bad. And they're like,
Mm.
but what's the problem? You know what I mean? So that's why observability is so key, right?
Yeah.
That's why we have to have those conversations. And so, and again, whenever you look at something, and this is, I mean, I've had this for over a decade, where you're like, this performance is slow here. They say, well, not just at this company, I mean, and so, but prod is fine, because
Yeah.
prod has however many cores and however much RAM and how many load balancers and all of this stuff that normally dev or our testing boxes are very, very small, right? And so kind of the determination is, when does that hockey stick happen, right,
Yeah.
in live? Because 10 years has told me that it will. It will happen.
No, especially because, as you describe it, it's a growth situation.
Right.
That's the aim of the company. That's a goal,
Right.
and it'll happen definitely. And uh, uh, twisting a little on a slightly personal and curious perspective, from the training of yesterday, what would you say you get out of there the most, or was more interesting, or I did well? I mean,
yeah, for sure.
and bad feedback as well, if you think that I.
Right. So, fortunately, unfortunately,
Mhm.
a lot of those steps we had done. Right.
Okay.
So by the end of the class, when we had a web service running, we had K6 running, we have it writing into Grafana and InfluxDB and importing the dashboard. That's something we had already done. And so what it
Mhm.
did for me is it really kind of cemented the fact that I'd done the right thing. So
You're on a good path. Yeah.
I will say, though, it took several days and several hours of troubleshooting, and when I did it on my own, whatever, 2 or 3 months ago,
Uh-huh.
that was covered in 4 hours or 3.5 hours or whatever. So like, what took us however long to get it on our own, just Googling and just swatting in the air, trying to
figure
solve
out.
problems, was done, right? And so I will say that was great, because I mean, we had a, like, of course it's a little bit different, and whenever you're doing your
Every
live
organization will
application,
have.
right? And of course, like, once you start looking at K6 and all the scenarios you can build, and you can build class structures and pulling them in, and all kinds of different things, when you're putting them in groups and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Obviously it can get like infinitely complex. Your tests can be really crazy, but when we started, our biggest thing was, we just needed a baseline. We needed to know where we're at now and where we're at regularly. And then again, going back to observability, right? Rather than just bad smells, right? We needed that observability, so that if something happens and it goes up, or, when we say, oh yes, this is a problem because this is taking too long, we make the change and now it's down, it cuts our, response time in half. We know that now, and we can see that trend, and now it's down here, and we can set that up. So, and to have been able to do that in a 3-hour session versus, however many days, weeks, or whatever it took us to, get that running, would have, I wish we would have done that first.
Yeah. I'm really happy because, on one hand, personally, I never had the chance to come to these events and learn this.
Right.
You made a sign like, a blind person stick trying to figure out
Right.
things, and you're wondering. Yeah, to me, it took years to get
Right.
to points where I could say, I think I'm doing things well, but still, I wouldn't get any confirmation, which I'm happy that I
Right,
gave you
yeah.
some sense of relief that you were on the right path.
Right.
And again, coming back to this conference and events and tutorials, workshops, all that, the benefit of these things is where you can quickly, I mean, learn some of those things and clear up the processes and understand. But at the same time, it's, I have to give you that it was only 3 hours,
Right.
3 and something hours. By the end, I'm seriously considering to making it a whole day next time
Absolutely.
because we didn't do any exercises. We had a kerfuffle at the end where my little silly API would not just come
Right.
back.
Right.
I killed it. Yeah, performance tester broke the software. Um, happens.
Yeah.
Uh, but there were so many things that had to be covered.
Right. It's such a broad topic that, like, how do you cover that in, say, 3 hours? And like you say, like, and then K6, the you can go at a very surface level. So like,
that was very
sh-
surface level.
well, even more than that. So 3 or 4 years ago, I was working at another company. I knew we needed performance testing, and so it's like I just needed to hit an API. You can spin up K6, throw it in, and have a relatively high level of confidence of what this is going to do, even if you're not writing out, even if you're not putting it in Grafana, you know. So like you can do it at that level, and then if you're writing into Influx, if you have that observability and you start, you can go incredibly deep too.
Mhm.
And so and that would be a good thing, because especially with like getting, say, the groups and stuff to show properly in Grafana, really kind of taking a dashboard, because we're even at this point now, we're like, okay, I can go and grab a
A
templated
template for the
dashboard,
dashboard.
right?
Uh-huh.
And it does what we need it to. It can go way deeper, but I don't know
Oh, the
Grafana
rabbit
queries
hole
language.
is super deep.
So
Each one of the topics that you mentioned,
yeah,
I think
you can almost do a session on their own. So
a 2-day workshop for each one of the things that you are mentioning
yeah,
easily if you want to get deep into each one of them
yeah,
because it's as you very well mentioned a good side and a bad side. With K6
right,
you can go nuts and have like thousands of JS files and I want to put this with this one
right,
and it's like
yeah,
um, can get to a very interesting point. Grafana, you can also get dashboards that get so deep that
yeah.
get. I think I mentioned some examples that you could get a link on each one of. You would. Did you have that functionality that you roll over? It gives you a zoom of what is inside of each one of the data points.
I don't
I
know. We have some of them, yeah. But
at
I
the
mean, it was
moment of the
whatever's built into the
session,
dashboard.
you
So yeah.
mouse over
Okay.
and the pop up, and this is the response time, size of the blah blah blah. Everything is in that one.
Right.
I love that graph.
Right.
And the options not to get into Influx, into Prometheus, into
Sure.
Jenkins.
Sure.
Each one of them is a rabbit hole on themselves.
Absolutely.
And something that I hope I hammered enough is not anymore a single solution that will give you that
Absolutely.
everything
Right.
in
Yeah.
the one tool to rule them all, right?
Right.
You have experienced that, right?
Yeah. I mean, you can spend a lot of money and get close to almost a single solution, but you know, it's not open source. You don't have as much control. We were talking about that earlier. We use Neoload, but if you want somebody else on your team to run it, well, they have to go and get a license, pull that license down, make sure you're on the same version, because we'd have somebody pull down a different version and they can't run the test. And so yeah, you have all kinds of stuff. Neoload agents monitoring it. You have all these different things, and so
The visualization, reporting, all the graphs, everything.
absolutely.
But
But it's not cheap, and it was complex. So
Mhm.
so newer people in our organization, or at least more junior, testers and stuff, were having a hard time running it. You can pull the NLP files, I think is what they're called, whatever their Neoload
it's
files
yeah
are.
the
But
results
even
and
still,
output.
like, well, even the test runs, you can kind of extract them out, but you have to pay extra if you want to be collaborative, right? If you want to put it into GitHub and the proper way, whatever. So there's that. Whereas with K6, you just host the files, you pull them down, you run them where you need to, you pull that into CI, you run it in CI without having to need any special Jenkins runners or whatever, like you would need. You have to put a Neoload agent on the server, whereas right now it's all part of our JavaScript package. You just pull JS, in your package.json,
You
and
just add the
just run it.
command in a pipeline file, or you just even and some of these elements I like a lot. You don't have it; it's open source. Create a plugin,
Right.
create an extension,
Right.
create, and many of them. When you mention Neoload and extracting the results, and
Yep.
at a project long ago, a friend of mine even hello Ben. great job. He created a Python script that would extract in the neoload. I think he had to reverse engineer that thing and recode it into a format that Tableau would understand. And it was like, dude, you're going through rings of fire here to get to the other side. And it's amazing that you managed to do it, but it shouldn't be that
Right.
complicated or limited, right?
Yeah. Earlier in my career, the performance testers I knew were the most competent testers I knew. Right. They were absolute superstars. I've got some folks that I work with that really kind of set the bar and set a really high standard for what performance testers are supposed to be. Um, one thing I like about especially using K6 is it takes performance testing from like this thing that's super complex
Mm-hmm.
um, and this really high level to like how can a normal tester use it on a day to day? How can you take a person who doesn't have a master's degree, who doesn't have and all these different things to give them that observability, right?
Ironically, it's making it more accessible, more. And you're saying a non-tester, and it's funny because everyone watching in the cameras, behind the camera, we have some banners
Yeah.
that is a developer experience with
Right.
K6. Um, Even developers should be able to basic knowledge because,
Right.
and that's an interesting point that you're making because performance testing, I don't think it's getting more complicated, but granular and punctual because
Right.
one of the elements that I make or explained at the tutorial was like, you don't have these complex scripts that go through hundreds of steps and
Right.
you're interested in an API. You're releasing that. How long is a script for a single endpoint of an API that you're trying to 50 lines?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I'm
yeah,
exaggerating.
not even that. Probably.
I may be exaggerating, but
Yeah.
and how many did you ever had experience with load runners or other coded?
Not too much. No. I mean, a little bit with JMeter. We ended up going.
It's hard to put it because JMeter has no lines of code.
Right. Exactly.
So
right. You can script it. You don't have to script. That's the thing. JMeter is so it's
Mutable?
powerful in the fact that it's mutable, right? You have so many options that you almost don't know where to start. That's how I was, at least with JMeter.
No, and then when you get with those many options to a weird spot, going back, it's super complicated.
Right. Yeah.
I think almost with any tool, if you complicate it enough, it's gonna be a peculiar
Yeah.
experience too.
Well, if you try to do everything, you don't do anything incredibly well, right?
Yeah.
That's the way it goes.
It's similar to what we were saying with the tools. Some of the tools before were so complex, massive, and heavy that they eventually. But when you're laser focused on what you're trying to do, and again, observability and performance testing needs to have a better coverage one at a time. Pay attention to
Right.
all of them, and I don't know. It's part of this evolution. What other changes have you noticing in the industry? Because there have been many.
That's as far as performance testing, or just generally.
Let's start with performance. It sounds like you have both.
Yeah. Well, so again, so my first experience with performance testing years ago, and again, we had some amazing people, and like they would do everything from service level testing to front end testing. They were like, okay, when you're doing this, let's lazy load these objects. Let's make this call later. Let's do this asynchronously. Let's gzip that, CDN this, and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And all those things are amazing. I had no idea what they were talking about at the time. I was a pretty junior tester. I barely know what those mean now. And so, or at least to make that recommendation. And so whenever I see performance, I was like, that's not something I can do. That's so far out of my purview because you really needed to be a developer or a computer scientist, I felt like, to make those calls and those decisions. Whereas as we're seeing now, we're kind of putting the hands back into the developers, especially as we move towards DevOps, platform engineering, all these different things where, instead of ops being in another team in a whole nother room, maybe even in another building, making all those decisions, we want to take infrastructure as code and give it to developers. we also want performance as code, right? Give it to developers, right? So if you can make a change on your API, run it, know immediately before you check in if you made a change to that. Like that's a huge step in kind of that right direction. Shift left, all these buzzwords we've been
Shift left,
doing.
shift right, sharing with everything. Because we have also a shift up, shift down,
Yeah,
where we are tearing up everything. And a friend told me, like, I don't like the shift term because sounds like you are removing from where it was.
that's true. Yeah,
I rather said spread,
right,
spread left, spread right, spread a little bit,
right.
because it's sharing, a key component of this new culture and people. And I think it was Ricardo del Rayo was saying it's a layer 8 problem, that culture problem, the interface between chair and keyboard.
Okay.
um, I think it starts there, allowing them to access and being able to be involved and care for this baby that the whole team is creating together. It's not anymore only ops, only devs, only here.
Right.
Making it accessible and as code and all that
Right.
is a big advantage. But looking at the time and that we have to start a ramp down, and
Okay.
it's always pun intended here with the last part of the show. Any recommendation that you would like to give to people considering attending to these events, or in terms of what you see that is happening? This is your 30 seconds, you say? How do you say?
Yeah, yeah,
There's a
yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
What would you like to tell the audience and
Yeah. So
recommend?
so you're probably wondering whether or not you should take one of these conferences and do it virtually because everything has gone virtual, or whether you should come in person. I would definitely say come in person, right?
Yeah.
So when you're trying to watch a tutorial and you're in front of your desk and you've got people pinging you on Slack, right? You're still kind of in the office since you don't leave your house anymore. I don't know about you guys, but I don't. So it's
Or
hard.
even just at home remotely,
Right, exactly. That's what I
you
mean,
cannot
right? Like,
focus enough.
right, exactly. So whenever you get in here, you can get that hands-on experience. You can ask those questions. Also, people are afraid to ask questions. Seems to be on virtual stuff, and it's
I cannot find the chat window. Times that has been
yeah,
true story.
right.
But
So anyway, I would say do that. Bring folks, network. I think a lot of people almost feel like conferences are also for managers, management and director level, but it's absolutely not, right? There's folks like myself who are in the trenches on a daily basis, and those are the people that I enjoy talking to, because they know the problems that they're dealing with, and you're going to find somebody with like-minded experience. You're going to find somebody in the same spot, somebody who's been there before, right?
or
Like,
with
we're all
a
on this journey,
complete
right?
opposite perspective.
That's true too.
That's also very rich in these events, where uh, even from other areas where people were like, why aren't you doing this way? Oh,
Right, yeah, absolutely.
this is cross-pollinating of ideas in these
Absolutely.
events. I'm super happy that you managed to come and get your process, and that you found them yourself. That's very
Sure.
remarkable. I highly respect and applaud you. And at the same time, that you could come and polish your skills,
Yeah.
confirm that you were doing things right, and hopefully you'll be learning more. This is only day 2
Right.
of
Only halfway through day 2. So more
halfway.
sessions.
Yeah, it's still early.
Yeah.
And well, we still be around. Joel, do you want to give the audience any contact if they want to send you some questions? As soon as like performance well.
Well, I'm getting there. I don't know. I don't necessarily know performance, but if you want to talk playwright, Cypress, any of that stuff, or just pick my brain as to where I've been on this journey over the last several, just feel free to look me up, Joel Hendershott, on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Awesome guy, knows the performance, and was the one that at the tutorial was nodding the most, and I could tell.
I was having a good time.
Yeah.
I was like, I've been there. Yeah, I did that. I know.
He's been places.
Right on.
Okay, so everyone, again, we'll keep doing these sessions, bringing awesome people to share the experience here at Star East with performance, with K6, with other tools, with other areas of testing, QA, and IT. So stay tuned. It's only day 2. We're just starting, and we'll be back soon. So time for end the stream and to do the dancing or something while the
That's
thing
right.
is, because it's